Welcome everyone to the finale of season 2 of Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yen, the comics half of this podcast, and for the season finale, we have a very special guest.
It's me, the guy who's been here from day one. I'm Nat, the sans half of this podcast. And actually, we do have a special guest. It's Yen.
No, you can't turn that
How does that feel? How does that feel?
It honestly makes me feel kind of good. It makes me feel welcomed into the space. It makes me feel warm. Warmer than I already am.
It is pretty warm. We are recording this podcast
from the Bahamas.
From
where we are evading taxes.
Some say Brooklyn is the Bahamas of New York.
Who says that?
Me.
Okay, fair. Now, what have you been enjoying lately?
Well, we watched a couple shows in New York. We being me and you. One show that we really, really enjoyed is The Connector. It's a new musical by Jason Robert Brown featuring Ben Levi Ross. Who else is in it?
Scott Bakula. Who Nat did not recognize.
I recognized facially, did not recognize nominally. That's correct, right?
I actually have no idea. I can't even correct you on that. I hope you're correct.
Like I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the face.
But you didn't know what the face was.
No, I said, he looks familiar.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Okay. All right.
It was a great musical. Deeply inspiring for us. Deeply moving. And just brilliantly written. What about you, Yen? What are you enjoying right now?
I'm rewatching Schitt's Creek.
Yeah, I am well aware. Every night I am subject to replays of Schitt's Creek as Yen uses his phone.
It's so good. I love Schitt's Creek.
From the little I've seen, it seems like a fun show.
The baby. That's my Moira Rose. That's for all you shitheads out there, as we call ourselves.
Is that really what the fans call?
I don't know. That's what I call them.
Great.
That's what I call people in general.
Just like how Brooklyn's the Bahamas, as I call it?
Yes, correct. Nat, I've got something very special for you today.
Isn't every episode special, Yen?
Yes, but today's especially special.
Especially
Today's
special.
especially so because we're doing a special reading.
That told me nothing.
Nat, I promised something in the first episode.
You did? Of season 1 or season 2?
Of season 2. I made a promise.
There were multiple promises made throughout this season. I'm going to just rattle off a few that I remember right now.
Okay.
Around episode 4, you said we're going to read more horror.
Yes.
That's not it.
That was not true. We will at some point, but that is not what we're reading today.
I believe in episode 1, we read Daredevil.
Yes.
And you promised Daredevil would make a return.
Yes.
Is this that especially
Say it with
special?
me, Nat.
Say it with you.
me.
Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Daredevil
Sans.
Sans. I hate this
Sans
show
Man.
so much. I hate doing this.
He's back. He's
I
got
hate doing
senses,
this.
and they're very sensy.
You know, we're doing a video recording of this, but they crop it at the knee, so you can't see that my ankle is chained to the wall, like Saw style. They told me the only way I can get out is if I cut it off, or I do this podcast week after week.
Who's they?
You.
Me?
Yeah.
My pronouns are he, him.
You got me there. Yeah, that got me. Yeah, that's true. That was a little bigoted of me.
Please.
Nat, we're back at the old Hornhead. The man without fear. We're ending season 2 where we began a perfect loop to Daredevil, to Matthew Murdock.
I'm excited.
But as promised, we're going somewhere else with the character.
Okay.
But before we do that, Nat, can you remind our audience or our listeners what Daredevil's all about?
Well, Matt Murdock, as you've literally said like 5 seconds ago.
Okay, just checking.
I want to quickly shout out this moment in episode 1. I think there's a reel of it on our Instagram where I reenact the origin story of Daredevil. And I think that I'm not going to do it again now.
Thank you.
I know my limits, but I just want to.
I don't think you do, actually.
I just want to point people towards that resource. You know, if you really want to understand the character on a visceral level, on a level that will reach you in ways that you've never experienced before, please look for that reel.
And then after that, you can go to the next reel where I call Nat ugly.
Sorry, what was the question again?
What's Daredevil about? Who is he?
Yeah. He's a guy who jumped in front of a truck to save an old man, was it? Mm-hmm. And then some toxic waste fell on him. He lost his sight, but then heightened all other senses. And then he became Sense Man, aka Daredevil. He's also a lawyer by day and then a superhero by night. But then all that got mixed up when people found out his true identity. So now he's both a lawyer and superhero by day and by night.
Okay. Great memory, Nat. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job. I will say that we're reading something from before that moment when people find out that he's Daredevil.
Okay, so this is pre-revealed identity.
Yes. But you know what? We'll get there. Okay, but can you remember why his comics are special? Do you remember my argument for why Daredevil comics are special?
They're just good.
No, that is not it. I mean, that is true, but that's incidental. I'm going to do it. Because
Sure.
Daredevil comics are good, or they're exciting superhero comics because they are telling the story of a character who cannot see in a visual medium.
That is correct.
So
10 points to you, Yant.
Thank you. So the idea that the comic can represent reality or is attempting to recreate reality is thrown out the window. Who cares? It's not even possible with Daredevil. I'm going to do something else completely. So actually, Nat, today's actually a return in two different ways.
Oh.
We're coming back to not just Daredevil. We're going back to a writer we have read before. This is the first time in Comic Sans that we're actually returning to a writer. We've never returned to a writer yet.
Don't ask me who it is. I'm definitely going to flop
That
on
next, on my next bullet point, can you guess who?
it.
It's actually guessable. Come on, think about it. Who have we read?
Jeff Lemire.
Nope, that's just the episode you just edited, so no. I said his name in the season 2 episode. I've said his name multiple times.
Jillian Tamaki.
That is not correct also. That is not correct.
Something Bendis. Brian. Brian.
Get the middle name, get the middle name.
Brian D. Bendis.
Nope, but okay.
Brian Michael Bendis.
Oh my goodness, where did you get that
Have
from?
I done it?
Yeah, you
oh
did.
man,
That's
I really had
amazing.
to excavate
Yeah, that was
deep
incredible.
into the lobes of my brain.
Yeah, I could see the veins of your forehead bulging out.
I'm so proud of myself.
I was going to call it an EMT.
What if, is that the saga writer?
Oh
no.
man.
1 step forward and 10 steps back.
Listeners, you may think that he's putting on an act. But no, I think he's genuinely asking that. I think he was so close, but he couldn't do it. That's
What did we read of Brian? Was
Ultimate
this-
Spider-Man.
Oh, yes.
Ultimate Spider-Man. Well, okay, to be honest, we're not just reading Brian Michael Bendis today. We're reading Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack.
Okay.
Okay?
Who we have not previously encountered.
Who we have not previously encountered. And so a quick foray into the publication history of what we're reading. So what we read before in episode 1 of this season was volume 4 of Daredevil.
Okay.
So that's like they renumbered him on the 4th time, and that was the 4th time he had done issue 1.
Got it.
Okay. Today we are reading from volume 2 of Daredevil.
Okay.
Okay. And this is specifically when he was under the Marvel Knights imprint.
What does that mean?
Well, great question, man. It's a publication wing of Marvel Comics that they created after they filed for bankruptcy.
Marvel filed for bankruptcy.
Oh, yes. Yes, this is before Iron Man. This is before the MCU. There was a time when it looked like Marvel was going to go out of business, and DC, Detective Comics would be the only thing standing.
But then
Then a lot of different things happened.
Right.
But I'm not going to get into all of that.
Oh,
Okay?
sorry.
But I will say...
I was very invested in this story.
No. Today we're not thinking so much about that. But I will say that Marvel Knights was this move to try and revitalize their existing line with a new imprint. So we've talked multiple times on this show about how comics are trying to get people to read comics.
Of course.
Right? How mainstream comics are always trying to get more readers. Marvel Knights was one of those ways.
Right.
Okay. And so what they wanted to make this sub-brand that existed underneath the mainline Marvel stuff, and that was working with indie artists and was building narratives that were story-centric rather than universe-centric.
I see.
Right? So none of this like globe-altering stuff, but like really minute, almost domestic stories.
Right.
Down to earth, real people, but there's still the mayhem of the main Marvel universe going around them.
Right.
Okay.
But not directly dealing with like all these different heroes and the world events happening in the universe of Marvel.
Well, you're going to see that actually in this.
Okay.
So that's an interesting point you're bringing up, where it does relate to something that's happening, a major thing that's happening in a Spider-Man comic,
Right.
but that's not the forefront of the issues you're going to be reading.
And you can engage with it without knowing that
Yes.
per se. Okay.
Yes. So one big...
Sounds perfect for me.
We'll see.
We'll see.
One big creator they bring in when they launch the imprint at all is David Mack. David Mack is this artist who's famous for his painterly style. It's almost impressionistic, realistic characters, but very unreal backgrounds. So he's a writer and artist. And then he brings in his buddy, Brian Michael Bendis, who at the time is already working on Ultimate Spider-Man.
We know a thing or two about buddies.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
We are award-winning buddies.
How many award-winning buddies do you know? I mean, okay, let's list some. Penn and Teller.
Oh, that's a good one. Red and Link.
Red and Link, okay, yeah, your favorites. The Coen brothers? I mean, I don't know if they're buddies, but they're brothers.
Who are those brothers in that movie you shouted out last episode? Duck Soup.
Oh, the Marx brothers?
But they weren't actually brothers, right?
No, they were actually brothers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But they looked like they were buddies.
You think they were award-winning?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely have way more awards. And I'm starting to think that we may be the buddies with the least amount of awards.
Okay, let's move on.
So Brian Michael Bendis is working on Ultimate Spider-Man, but he's not being brought in for that. So he's already, sort of hit this pop culture milestone. He's changed that line of comics, but he's not being brought in for that. He's being brought in specifically for the stuff he was doing before that, which is gritty sensibilities, like I said, down to earth, real people. And so Bendis and Mack start their run of Daredevil, but it's not actually even about Daredevil.
What?
You're going to see this. It's about Ben Urich, a reporter at the Daily Bugle chasing down a story.
That sounds familiar. Is that Spider-Man?
Yes.
Okay.
Good job, Nat.
Wow.
That's where Peter Parker takes his photos from.
Yeah.
That's where J. Jonah Jameson is from.
Wow, okay,
The editor-in-chief. So in the backdrop, so this thing we're talking about other stuff happening in the backdrop, there's the trial of the century because the Kingpin, you know who the Kingpin is.
I know who Kingpin is. I've seen Into the Spider-Verse, yes.
Yeah. So the Kingpin is on trial. He's in court, but we're not there.
Okay.
That's not where we're at. We're with Urich chasing down a story that no one else in New York cares about.
Okay.
I won't say more. This is the one thing that I think is a little confusing to an outside reader, is that Ben and Matt Murdock / Daredevil are friends, and Ben is one of the only people who knows that they're the same person, that knows that Matt Murdock and Daredevil are the same people.
At this point of time.
And he's keeping that secret.
I see.
And it's already gotten him into danger because in a previous instance, he had a life-threatening injury from Elektra.
He being Ben.
Ben, do you know who Elektra is? Does that do anything for you?
No.
Elektra is Daredevil's ex-girlfriend who's also a ninja.
That is news to me. And
So-
she sounds very cool.
She's pretty cool, man. She's pretty cool. But she also killed or almost killed Ben.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so
Intentionally?
intentionally.
Oh, she's not cool.
Okay.
But do we like Ben? Sorry. Whose side are we on?
We like Ben. We like
Oh,
Ben.
we like Ben.
Okay,
Okay.
get ready. Okay.
Okay.
But we're already getting lost in the lore. That's not what we're here for. Why this run? Why this run of Daredevil?
Yeah.
Okay. So the arc we're reading, okay, issues 16 and 19 of volume 2 of Daredevil. This arc is called Wake Up. It's by Mack and Bendis, illustrated by Mack. It's about a lot more than Urich, Daredevil, New York, any of that. It's about how the act of writing specifically, the act of making a story, the act of making a comic at all helps us understand the world.
Wow.
Yes.
Meta.
Yes. Making these comics, writing at all, helps the characters of this story create order. It helps them create barriers and inroads to better see what's happened to them. It quite literally, at one point, makes meaning from the act of paneling, of sequencing, of illustration.
Okay.
And that's literally what every comic does. But this time, we're not going to see the writer and artist do it. We're going to see the characters within the book do it.
They're making a comic?
They're going to do the work we do every time we pick up a comic. So now it's your turn, Matt. We're reading, again, from volume 2 of Daredevil, 1998, the arc called Wake Up, and you're going to be reading issue 16, a little bit of 18. So we're going to skip issue 17, a little bit of 18, I'll tell you what, and then we're going to close it with issue 19.
Okay.
You ready for this, Nat? You ready?
I don't know if I'm ready.
You ready to read Daredevil in New York City? In New York City?
In New York City.
In New York City?
In the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas?
Of New York City, Brooklyn.
Welcome back to Comic Sans for those of you who left to go read, and for those of you who are still sitting on that same bus listening continuously. I hope it's been a fruitful ride and you've seen someone interesting out your window.
Sorry, I'm just shell-shocked. Because what a profoundly sad... I mean, this is how you wanted to end the season?
Yeah, I forgot how much
You
about
really set this up with like, oh, it's going to be so special, exciting.
special.
I mean, sure.
It's very
Sure,
evocative.
I know Daredevil means a lot to you, but man...
Okay.
I hope you have a structure to how you want to talk about this, because I don't even know where to begin.
Nat, I assure you I do not. We're going to see where the wind takes us, but let's start with my one bit of structure, which is your 5 words to describe what you just read.
Sure. I'll start with sort of subject matter
Okay.
level things and then go a little bit deeper to
Okay.
how I feel
Okay.
through the 5 words.
Oh,
So
excellent.
This
Wow.
journey.
Wow, okay.
We're going to start with journalism.
Okay.
You know, I think that, as we mentioned, that is the framing device of this book through the lens of Ben Urich. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
So journalism is my first word. My second word will be, and I don't use this word lightly, trauma.
Okay.
I think it is obviously a key theme in this book. My third word is memory.
Excellent.
I think,
okay.
you know, what we remember and what we do not remember.
Yeah.
What sits in our subconscious, what we can conjure, what manifests as just emotion rather than tangible memory. all of that is discussed and expressed in the book very beautifully, very artistically, and probably in ways that whatever discussion we engage in will not do justice to.
100%. We are going to Comic Sans, the rare piece of art criticism that makes the work worse. Actually, that's not rare. That's most of it. But never mind.
Was that my third word, man?
That was your third. Your third was, so you said journalism, trauma, memory. Number 4.
My fourth word will be healing.
Okay.
And I say that with like a slight question mark because I think there are allusions to that at the end that we'll get to. It's not all clean and
it is
rosy.
Not. No.
But I like that there was a little bit of that at the end.
And your last word, Nat. Was that it?
Maybe. Because what I was going to say, which is definitely not a word, is this life sucks and,
oh, man.
There are so many unfortunate people in the world who are victims of their circumstances. That's my word.
Oh, that's a sad word, man. And that's
encapsulated,
that's hyphenated all the way through.
Encapsulated in.
I think that comes through. Okay, Nat, can you tell us a little bit about what you read, what you actually read now in plot? So I've already said that it's about Ben Urich, a journalist.
Yeah.
What's he investigating?
Quick side note.
Yeah.
It's so relevant that I mentioned the connector at the start of this episode.
True.
Which is also about journalism.
Yes.
Obviously, slightly different, but this idea of chasing a story.
I mean, it's about the value of truth. Both the connector and this is about what does the truth mean and what does it do for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in short, this story, this arc follows Ben Urich as he's chasing a story.
Yes.
A story that his boss, Jonah, has told him is worthless. Don't chase this story. Kingpin's on trial. Focus on that. That's what I'm paying you for. That's your job. But Ben is obsessed with this story and he feels he needs to uncover the truth of it. And the story revolves this little boy, very cute, blonde hair, blue eyes. And this boy obviously is experiencing some form of trauma. We encounter him repeating the same lines over and over again, the same story over and over again. And Ben knows he's seen something. And
Story about who?
That involves Leapfrog, who is his dad.
Spoilers.
And Daredevil. And so Ben, who knows Nat Murdock and Daredevil, is like, okay, I need to figure out what happened to this kid. I need to ask Matt what happened. Finds him. Matt gives his recollection of what happened, which is he was chasing Leapfrog for some petty crimes. Fights him. Leapfrog hits a exposed wire of some sort. Daredevil blacks out, and then when he wakes up, Leapfrog is gone. And as we follow this story, we learn through Timmy's recollections. Is that correct?
Through Ben's
piecing together,
pushing Timmy to find out what happened. And the only way they can do that is by piecing together Timmy's drawings
that form a comic of sorts
into what is essentially a 16-panel page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you learn the truth that Timmy, again, spoiler alert. Oh, a key part of Daredevil's recollection is that Timmy was there in the room.
Yes.
They fell into their house, I assume, and Timmy opened his bedroom door and was like, what's going on? But Timmy sheds light on what happened when Daredevil was passed out for the 30 seconds, which was he took the exposed wire, electrocuted his dad. His dad fell out the window, landed in a waste truck, and has disappeared. And Timmy is obviously dealing with the trauma of killing his own father, but we also learned that his father was abusive, which is a key part of the story.
And something that we're kind of, once again, where
I'm butchering this story.
No. Yeah. It's not your fault. We're worsening the quality of it because the pace at which Bendis and Mack divvy out this information throughout the story is so excellent.
Yeah.
Because actually in the first few pages, the reason Ben is chasing down this story so hard is because he actually thinks Daredevil hurt this kid. Because the story opens with not David Mack's drawings.
Yeah. Let's start there, actually. I mean, I didn't want to talk about that.
With this very heavy inked style by Mark Morales.
Miles Morales?
Mark Morales.
Oh,
take it
man.
easy. Take it easy. Mark Morales, which is more reminiscent of comics in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Very classic
Very conventional.
style. Yeah.
Thick lines, flat colors, very expressive bodies, flying in the air. And Daredevil is fighting this creature named the Fury. And it's unclear who is on whose side. Like whether we're on the side of Fury or on the side of Daredevil. And as the story goes on, its quality sort of degrades. The art
style changes, I'd say.
It goes from this very thick-lined work of Mark Morales into this kind of sketchings of a kid.
Now, see, you said that's very prescriptive of you, Yen.
I understand the sentiment in which you mean, but I do not think you meant the word prescriptive.
You're prescribing that this is better, this is the way comics should be drawn, and then
Don't know
therefore
that's how we use the word prescriptive.
Is it not?
I think if I'm telling you to do it something. I do agree with what you're saying is that I'm forcing an objective ranking of these art styles, which is not actually what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's not at all what this story is about. This story is about how these art styles can exist side by side, and actually Timmy's scratchiness can communicate things that all the power of Ben's words cannot reach.
Yeah. But I was extremely caught off guard by that one panel where the art style changes, right?
Well, it's mid-page.
Yeah.
It's the high expression of Mark Morales, and then as we go down the panel, suddenly it's very clearly a kid's drawing.
Yeah.
And then Ben appears for the first time in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the background starts to become the painterly stuff that becomes the rest of the comic book. That's, David Mack's style. And
beautiful.
Wonderful, right?
Amazing.
I mean, let's use some words to describe it. A little bit of watercolor.
A bit splotchy.
Yeah.
Backgrounds are a bit splotchy, watercolor. Very, I would say
it's very loose. It's very loose. And I would say it's almost wild. It's impossible to do what Mack is doing in a precise way, right? Because there are splotches of paint around it.
Do you know if he's doing it digitally or it's really watercolor on paper?
I'm almost 100% sure that David Mack is doing this physically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you get that sense of drippiness.
And I think what it may be is that he has the outlines and then he does the drippage and then perhaps he goes over another layer of it.
Digitally? Maybe.
Or he's putting together different
Let me
layers.
just text him. I'll check with him.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And then, oh my goodness. So we're still in page 5 of this story, right? We've gone from Mark Morales' fine, thick lines to Mack's painterly style to Timmy's drawings. And then the next page is fully Mack.
A full page spread.
And it's Timmy sitting on his bed with this kind of illegible text of him trying to answer Ben why he's so obsessed with Daredevil.
Yeah.
And it starts with just because. Because end of the line, mister, we'll see about that, Hornhead. How does this look to you? Smack, don't think. And
these are the lines that he's been saying through the first 4 pages, kind of like the dialogue of this comic that he's piecing together in his head.
Which we don't know is coming from Timmy when we're reading.
Yeah, at the start, you think it's a
comic.
regular Daredevil comic.
I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, you're picking up this issue of Daredevil and you're thinking, it's just Daredevil. I'm going to, see what old Hornhead is up to.
I'm just in for another good old crime busting time.
And then suddenly by page 4, you're like, wait a second, this kid is reading comics.
Yeah.
It's just,
and he's distressed.
And he's extremely distressed. It's such an incredible transition that Bendis and Mack do together.
And I want to ask you about this particular panel, which was really interesting to me, and I couldn't really figure out what they were trying to do artistically. So on the next page, there's a series of horizontal panels, and in one of them, it's Timmy, but it's kind of like if you put an image into Microsoft Word, and then like you transform it, but you accidentally don't click on the diagonal corner, you click on the point that's like in the middle of the image, and you move it, and then it becomes squished.
You compress it.
You compress it. What is that doing for you?
Well, I think what it's doing for me is it's getting across this destabilization. And I think also, to take it a step further, it's getting us into the POV of Ben.
Right.
Where he's seeing this kid is even smaller than the kid already is. Which is very interesting because other than that, I think you can say that David Mack's style is pretty realistic.
Right.
A lot of the characters look like people. And we're going to get to a character that really looks like a person. I'm going to see if you can tell who it is, but we'll get there. But I think it's just this further sense of bringing us distortion of reality. It's keeping us off our toes, and we're already on edge because we're not reading Daredevil. I mean, I don't know. What did you notice when Daredevil even shows up in the stuff you were reading?
Yeah, like way
barely.
Late, yeah,
barely. It's Daredevil, and he's barely in it.
I mean, and I think for me, I was primed for that.
Yeah,
you told me already that this would be through the perspective of Ben Urich, but I can imagine for someone who is a Daredevil fan picking this up with no context, they'd be like, "What?"
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of what made Marvel Knights so exciting was that it was willing to pull focus from the thing you expect. We're going to leave Daredevil behind. We're going to focus on this reporter who was originally a Spider-Man side character and then now becomes a Daredevil side character.
Turning one more page.
Yes.
I thought this was really interesting. We get a huge chunk of prose.
Oh, I love this page. I love this
when
page.
I was reading it, I was like, I don't think we've encountered such a large chunk of text in any comic before. I mean, I would say based off just eyeballing it, 200 words?
I would say so, yeah, something like that.
And it's just continuous prose. But somehow it works because Ben's a writer, because he's a journalist. I mean, he's telling his own story and then accompanying this chunk of text, which is framed on the right side of the page, you have like just a collage of sketches of typewriters and then just the word tap, 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 tap.
In different fonts, almost like a word cloud of the word tap, but just all over the place, overlapping. It's, again, chaos. Overlaid over this yellow page, right? So it's not just on a white page. No, this is on paper. So we're already working with like materials in a way that I don't think you've seen. Certainly Mark Waid wasn't doing it in the other issue of Daredevil you read.
Yeah.
Right?
No, not at all.
And not to like disparage that comic, it's just doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Bendis and Mack are concerned with something completely different here, which is why Ben is the focus of the story.
Yeah. And I think what I'm observing, even as I flip through the pages now, as I take a step back and just look at the pages from like a distance, the art doesn't have a clear flow. Like if I took away all the speech bubbles, your eye doesn't know where to begin.
Yeah.
But what leads your eye are the speech bubbles.
Yeah.
The speech bubbles have a very clear flow to the page. Obviously, as English readers, we read left to right. So we always start at the top left, but somehow it just guides you through. I assume that's easier said than done.
And that's a real testament to the letterers, because that's actually not decided by the artist.
Oh.
It's another job.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, wouldn't they have worked in tandem to like understand where are you putting this face, who's talking, like...
Yeah. It's not entirely like, they send the draft over and that's it.
Yeah.
There is a sort of conversation about it.
Sure.
But also you look at Mack's stuff. I think he's doing these with the intention to leave space for the dialogue, knowing that Bendis is dialogue heavy. And then it's just going forward from there.
Like this speech bubble that's sitting above the character's head could have sat below the character's head.
Yes.
And that would have done something else for the reader experience.
Yeah, then you'd be like sort of nodding your chin up and down trying to read the page,
yeah,
rather than just going continuously across,
right,
while you're also being bombarded by this incredibly chaotic outline.
This like visual smorgasbord of just paint and color.
Styles and just
vibes.
Yeah, truly vibes, right? I mean, look at J. Jonah Jameson's cigar smoke and how it just sort of trails across panels, across gutters. It's just this beautiful wisping image that
and again,
is blue. It's not even the right color, but it's amazing.
And again, you have this quote unquote gutter panel line that's just cutting through his face. Like it's not doing anything in terms of what we understand panels to do typically, but it's just this aesthetic choice to... Well, I guess if anything, it's framing the speech bubbles more than the art, right? If you see the way that it contains these two speech bubbles. Yeah, it's just wild.
Honestly, rereading this comic, I think it's one of those where I'm even like, I don't even know how to talk about this. I'm struggling to understand what David Mack is doing. So I just know it's working.
Just stop listening and go read the damn comic.
Yes, please read this one, people. Read this one.
It's interesting coming into this comic right after reading Asteria's Polyp, because that one was all about style as content, right?
Yeah.
And in many ways, we see that here in terms of different styles, different ways of depicting characters. But somehow, and again, I'm not saying this to disparage what David Mazzucchelli was doing, but this just feels, is it wrong to say more sophisticated? Would you agree? I don't know.
Whoa, I don't know if I would agree. I think it's different objectives. I mean, I think what David Mack and Bendis are doing, it's almost style as mood. And I think that's a very fascinating thing they're doing.
Okay, that's fair.
And the mood is contributing to theme, and the mood is content as well. But I think that is part of what's going on here.
Yeah, I withdraw my statement. I think both...
That was fast. If Matt Murdock was here, he'd be on your ass with a subpoena or something that they do in court. Let's go to this next page where after J. Jonah Jameson is smoking a cigar, Ben Urich immediately goes out and smokes a cigarette. Did you notice this over here, Nat? And this long panel that's got two exquisite things about it that are pretty easy to miss on a first read.
Well, I did notice the headlines. They look like newspaper cutouts that have been paper machéd onto the background. And they all have the same headline, right? Which is, warning, quitting smoking. Oh, no, they're not all the same headline. They're all about quitting smoking and the risks smoking poses to your health.
And they're also all on a vertical alignment, right? So they're matching the direction of Ben's smoke.
Right.
And at the top, did you see that over there?
I did see that. I didn't make sense of it, but I did see it, which is just a dude flying.
A dude flying with his hammer, because that's Thor.
Oh.
Because this is Marvel Knights. We're in New York City. We're looking at a journalist, but this is still the city of heroes. This is still superheroes running around.
Right. And that's just an Easter egg, no significance to the story.
No significance. Okay. Just a little cool thing.
Okay.
I think it is especially cool with what happens on the next page. You know who this next character is on the next page, don't you? Did you know what was going on in this page? I didn't want to foreshadow this. I wanted to see if you would be able to get there. Can you tell who this character is? So Ben's standing outside the Daily Bugle and he's smoking, and this guy comes up to him and starts talking to him.
I'm going to venture a guess.
Yeah?
I'm probably going to be wrong.
Okay.
Is it Harry?
No, it's not Harry. It's not Harry. My guy. Who else works at the Daily Bugle?
Peter Parker?
It's Peter Parker.
Okay, that was my first guess, but then I was like, that's too obvious. And he doesn't look like Peter Parker. I mean...
Do you know, who does he look like?
He looks like Harry Osborn.
No, he looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. That's young Leonardo DiCaprio. That's literally the model David Mack used.
Okay. I guess in my head, because, I consume the movies more than I was thinking like, he doesn't look like Tobey Maguire. He doesn't look like Andrew Garfield. He doesn't look like Tom Holland.
Okay.
Who's the actor that plays Harry Osborn in the Tobey Maguire movies?
James Franco?
Kind of looks like him. A little.
Anyway, I just like this page a lot because of the restraint that Bendis and Mack put on it. I mean, I know you didn't get it, and that's fine, but it's really exciting to see Spider-Man, but it's actually not Spider-Man. It's Peter Parker.
Yeah. And does Ben know about...
Ben does not know.
Okay.
Nobody knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man in this book.
Right.
So what's happening on this page is Ben has just been harangued by J. Jonah Jameson about chasing the story that nobody cares about.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, should I do it? Should I bother doing it? And he's standing there, he's having a smoke. And Peter Parker comes by and he's like, oh, tell me about the story you're working on. Ben tells him a little bit. And Peter Parker goes, oh, did you know I'm an orphan? And Ben goes, no, I didn't. Because why would Ben know that?
Yeah.
Right? Ben doesn't know that because they're just colleagues. But for the reader, we're like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Man, you're going to swing at us with this? And that's the whole reason Ben chases this story is because of what Peter says to him.
Oh, I didn't really get that when I read it.
Yeah. That's why, like, Ben's not sure about doing this. And Peter says, I'm an orphan, so I know how much, how difficult that can be, how much pain
He says,
this kid can be in.
I'm just saying that kind of stuff can be really hard on a kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the crux of why Ben is doing this. He's trying to help this kid.
Yeah. And I mean, just again, returning to the art.
Yes.
The drawings of the characters on this page look like character studies. Like they're not positioned to look like they're having a conversation.
They're not facing each other. They're both kind of facing us, actually.
You just kind of see like profiles of Peter. There's a sketchy one at the top. There's a more painterly one below. And then you have another profile of Ben looking over his shoulder, but it's not looking at Peter. It's looking at us.
Yes.
And then only at the bottom, there's a little vignette of like
the two of them facing
Peter
each
Parker
other.
with his hand on Ben's shoulder. But it's just right there in the bottom. And it's just like, in terms of what the art is depicting composition-wise, it's almost detached from the story.
Yeah.
But then the coloring and the art style is the bridge between the art and the story. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. I think what you're pointing to is this thing that I keep coming back to, which is that he's not trying to recreate reality. This is comic books doing something that only comic books can do. I mean, look at the bottom left of that page. There's like paint smears on it.
For no reason.
For no reason. And white space. There's just an open white L that's got paint smears in it. Right? And so we are being reminded that this is a created work. We are being reminded that we're reading a comic book that was made by someone, and that comes to a head at the end of issue 18.
It almost does the opposite of trying to immerse you in the world.
Yeah. Well, if we talk about, let me break out, theater studies.
Sure.
Have you heard of Bertolt Brecht?
I have not.
Okay, so Bertolt Brecht, his whole thing was about alienation, which is about trying to make the audience aware that they're watching a show.
Right.
So that they can think about what the show is trying to say to them. It was a very politically motivated form of art, right? It's not trying to make you think, oh, I'm in this person's living room and I'm watching reality. It's,
right.
No, there's a narrator and they're all going to change into their costumes on stage and all that so that you can be aware this story is trying to tell you something and it wants you to do something. And I think that is something akin to what David Mack is doing here and what Bendis is doing is they're not trying to recreate reality. They're letting you know, hey, by the way, in case you forgot, you're reading a comic book.
Yeah.
And that act of reading a comic book is actually incredibly meaningful. And it's also a way of understanding memory and sequence and linearity of time.
I was just going to say that approach then maps perfectly with the themes and the subject matter explored in this particular arc.
Yes. Which is, again, just to keep hammering this point home, so different from the other issue of Daredevil you read.
Yeah.
Like worlds apart.
Which is interesting because you open this episode by saying the reason you love Daredevil is because the writers portray blindness or a lack of vision through a visual medium, but that's not even appearing in this at all.
Well, it does happen at one point, but it's not so much the blindness that's the thing, it's the instant knowledge that you're never going to be able to get it right.
Right.
And so don't even try to do that, do something else.
Speaking of which, there's a great moment on the next page where Ben goes to meet Matt Murdock in the movie theater and Matt says, I'm really not a movie guy. Which is just, that's great. That's great.
I don't know if you know, I mean, this is just some intertextual stuff, but they're watching Taxi Driver.
Oh, okay. I did not get that.
Yeah, so that's actually Robert De Niro.
Oh.
That's a drawing of Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver. And similar themes about, I guess, alienation, disconnect from reality, vengeance. I think that's part of what's going on here. I also I'm going back to the thing I was saying earlier about how sometimes I can't even dissect these pages, right? Not that I'm like some master of the medium or anything, right? But
You're not?
gotcha.
What are we doing here? Let's get an expert on this show.
Please get an expert on this show to tell me why Brian Michael Bendis chose Taxi Driver. I think there's some thematic alignment, but I do feel like there's something I'm just like,
I'll send a follow-up text.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we return one page?
Yeah.
I do want to talk about the page preceding. This is also something that I couldn't really understand why. So the page preceding was just this random cut to, I assume, Ben eating dinner with his family.
Yes.
Characters who we don't really see again.
Until the end.
Right, until the very, very end. And so the top panel is them sitting at a table, but the style is very different. And throughout this whole page of, again, pretty much just profiles of the different family members, fully frontal profiles, but it's a very heavily caricatured style.
Yeah.
Why?
I think the point of it is to point to how unable this family is to communicate with each other.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? So the three of them are sitting at this table, unable to speak. And actually at the bottom right, etched into it, what looks like carved into the page. Do you see that?
Oh, no words.
Because this family is unable to communicate with each other.
To the extent that it's a joke almost, maybe? Farcical?
I mean, perhaps, but I think it's also motivating Ben to want to find more about Timmy, try to help this kid,
Help his family.
Right? Especially coming right after the page where Peter Parker is saying, oh, I'm an orphan.
Yeah, right.
Right?
That is right after that.
And this is Ben's nuclear family, and they don't seem to be very happy. They can't communicate. And so there's some sort of yearning, there's some sort of, how can I help this kid who I have what he doesn't, but it's not even working out for me.
Yeah. I just can't even imagine how many drafts this must have took. Sorry, I'm taking a few steps back, but just like...
No, yeah. I wonder too. I have no idea.
Because the layers upon layers of meaning and meaning making that is happening throughout this, through the art style, the coloring, the placement of this, it's just so collaborative. It almost feels as collaborative as writing a musical.
Great segue, Nan. Anyway, we have this little section here where it turns out that Ben didn't actually go to the theater to meet
It was
Matt.
a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. And in the middle of the nightmare, he gets stabbed by Elektra. Or Matt gets stabbed by Elektra.
Oh, okay. I didn't really fully understand that.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why I gave you a little bit of that in the end.
I thought it was Matt stabbing Ben.
All that matters is that it doesn't happen and we see that Ben is afraid.
Right.
That's the primary thing that's going on here. And right after that, we have Ben going back to Timmy. He's made up his mind. He's going to try and figure out what's going on with this kid.
So this kid is now sitting in this sort of like lab facility or some sort of treatment facility.
It's like a shelter, yeah.
Yeah.
Some sort of place for him.
Timmy is drawing on a piece of paper and he's just surrounded by pieces of paper, all with his sketches on them. And he's manically just kind of sketching what we later learn are like comic panels.
Yeah.
Which is a depiction of what happened between his father and Daredevil as he saw it through his eyes. I just want to zoom in at the bottom right.
Yes.
The bottom right illustration of Timmy, which I would say in the whole comic is maybe one of the most photorealistic depictions.
Mm-hmm.
And the look on his face is just so full of despair.
Yeah.
And it's heart-wrenching.
And what's he saying?
To be continued.
It's crazy. In a different book, that could be read as a joke. But here, we're like, oh my gosh, this child really doesn't know how to interpret the world outside of the comic book. And it just so happens to be that is also the end of the issue, so it will be continued.
Yeah.
So we skipped over issue 17. What we did was we went actually to the last 6 pages of 18, which is when Ben returns to Timmy and realizes what these drawings are.
Yep.
And so we're going to go straight to that.
Yeah, so in these pages of issue 18 that I read, Ben returns to the facility. The staff, I don't think they gave her a name, is trying to prompt Timmy to answer some questions. They're still trying to figure out what he saw. They're trying to figure out what happened to Leapfrog, his dad, who has since disappeared.
And again, it's important to note that Timmy is essentially nonverbal at this point.
Yeah.
He cannot speak in things that are not the lines from the comic that we read in the first pages of this entire arc.
He just has this daze in his eyes. He's looking into nothingness and they're not getting anywhere. They're not making any headway. Timmy is not responding. And then I think, was it Ben who had the idea to sort of, okay, let's organize all these drawings you've created sequentially.
Before we get there.
Okay.
this right-hand page, when Ben is trying to prompt Timmy into like, what do all these images mean? We're actually now inverting, I think, our perspective, and we're looking from Timmy's perspective.
Right.
Because now Ben is all scratchy and outlined and looking like a child's drawing.
Right.
And so we're seeing Ben through Timmy's eyes.
And Timmy is the photorealistic. And we say that with air quotes because, you know, it's still very painterly.
Yeah.
But it's not distorted.
No.
In a way that Ben is in this series of panels.
And at the bottom of the page, Ben says, if I laid these out on the floor like this, like a comic, would you tell me if I was doing it in the right order? What happens in this image, Timmy? What does this mean? And Timmy goes, meanwhile, which is a very classic cutaway caption text of a comic book. And when you go to the next page, and it's this 2-page spread of these images we've been seeing Timmy draw since issue 1, arranged into a semi-story.
And then interspersed within those pages are Mack's own drawings of Timmy and his face and Ben's face and the nurse's face.
Tell me, Nat, how long did you linger on this? Did you understand what was going on? Did you try to parse out what was going on?
The main thing I got from this series of images was that his dad was abusive. Because up to this point, we had only seen depictions of Leapfrog and Daredevil fighting.
Yeah.
But in this mix, suddenly there's an image of a man with a belt coiled around his hands. And that comes out of nowhere and you're like, wait, that wasn't from the fight.
No.
And then it becomes very obvious that, okay, that's a core memory of this boy, of his dad beating him. So that was my main takeaway. It wasn't immediately clear that he killed his father or anything like that from this.
And I think what's really fascinating about this image you brought up about the belt is how it's interspersed within the montage almost.
Yeah.
Right? And it's telling it that story in a way only comic books can, because it's showing the previous panel is Leapfrog grinning, and then it's Leapfrog with the belt, and then it's Leapfrog with a weapon that's going to strike Daredevil. And so we're seeing those two things now connected.
Yeah.
In a way that, you know, if you saw these images randomly with no sequence, you would have no idea what's going on.
And it also reflects, I guess, how Timmy made that connection in his head.
Yes.
You know,
of what he was trying to stop
Yeah.
from happening.
Yeah.
And a word I realized we've neglected to use is crayon.
Oh, right.
Right? Because we're talking about all these different textures and materials and stuff. Timmy's drawing in crayon.
Yeah.
So again, just to list the different types of materials we're exploring here, right? There's newspaper pages, there's newspaper headlines, there's paint, watercolor, crayons.
And again, I would imagine that David Mack did this physically with crayon and paper, because I don't know how you would replicate this texture digitally.
No, I think he must have.
Maybe you could with today's technology, but I would like to believe that this is really crayon on paper.
I think it is crayon on paper. And then there's also pen and there's pencil. I mean, we're just running through the whole
stationery shop.
Yeah. It's like,
where's the charcoal, man?
And it never feels like a novelty.
Yeah.
It always feels intentional. It feels like that was the exact right choice at that moment. You know, it doesn't feel like David Mack had this checklist through the stationery store and was like, okay, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this.
And I say this carefully because the subject matter is so heavy, but we talked about in previous episodes about when it's clear that the writers are having fun.
Right.
You know, and obviously the subject matter is not fun, but you could tell that there was a lot of liberty in the choices that they made. Yeah.
They were challenging themselves. They were pushing themselves. They were seeing how far they could go, and I think they went pretty far. And now we're going to go into issue 19.
Yep.
Which is when it all comes to a head. We're finally finding out what's going on. And finally, Matthew Murdock...
Hey, Daredevil, there you are.
...does us the good favor of showing up.
It's kind of like when Zendaya shows up in Dune.
Sure, yeah. In Dune Part 1.
Yeah,
Dune Part 2.
She was all there in the marketing. Didn't make an appearance.
Shows up at the 2-hour mark. But it would be more like that if it wasn't called Dune and it was called Zendaya.
Zendunya.
Okay, somebody's probably done that, I'm sure.
Mr. Matt Murdock appears.
And through perhaps a little slightly more conventional paneling, he tells Ben his memory of the events.
Right, which includes, you know, the moment where he blacks out for 30 seconds.
And which is important because it's done in a 9-panel page. And the moment when he blacks out is 2 black panels in the middle of the page.
And everything color-wise is just red and black. It kind of feels like, you know, when you're in a dark room and only this red light is on. That's kind of how it feels. Would you say this is sort of...
I would say this is approximating how Daredevil
sees the world.
Yeah.
You know, really creative paneling again. Again, panels that cut through images.
Almost like a spiral of
overlapping panels. Yeah.
The physical textures of it are just amazing.
You know, and here it would be remiss if I didn't mention...
Oh, you've got to.
His butt.
You've got to. I mean, as we've discussed, Matthew Murdock is a bit of a
A bit of a.
A man
it
about
rhymes,
town.
It rhymes with butt and starts with slur.
Okay, he's a man about town. This is also the second time they showed his butt. You missed the previous time.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How
Yeah,
could
come on,
we?
let's show.
How could we?
It's right there.
Oh, yes.
Double cheeked up on a Thursday.
Honestly, that's the exact same image.
It's the same panel.
It's the exact
But
same
you don't
image.
mind.
I don't mind.
You know, that's the thing about Daredevil. You hate
Like,
to see him come for
his
you,
suit-
but you love to see him leave.
His suit didn't need to be so tight. Is it normally that tight?
Agree to disagree.
Like it's almost like latex.
Yeah. You want me in baggy jeans? Come on. Let him show what he's got going on. Now back to the very serious business of this comic book. So this image we keep talking about with Daredevil's butt.
Yeah.
Matthew Murdock says this, okay? He talks about why this case has been so weird for the police department. That's in an issue you skipped.
Right.
Which is Ben goes to the police department and the police are like, Leapfrog, good. No one's seen him? I don't care.
Matthew does describe him as a goofball, which I enjoyed.
He says, this is what Matthew Murdock says. He's because sometimes, just sometimes, I feel saddled with the most pathetic rogues gallery. It's embarrassing. And there's an implied pause. And Matthew goes, well, it is. And then Ben says, the kid on the roof, that was his kid, Leapfrog's kid. And so there's this little moment of levity, like where Matthew Murdock is self-reflexive and thinking, like, man, my villains suck. And then Ben's like, okay, don't say that because it's actually really sad.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what I've been doing for the last 3 issues. While you've been out there in your skin-tight pants, I've been helping this kid collect the fragments of his life together.
Can you imagine if we measured time in issues? Like, hey man, I took an issue to get here.
That is what I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, that is what I do.
How long has this New York trip been for you? Yeah.
Well, actually, because I've been reading a lot of comics on Libby, on the online app for the National Library of Singapore.
Right.
And it actually tells you how long you've been reading the comic.
No. I don't mean how many issues you read. I mean how many issues of your life comic have passed, you know?
Oh, I'd say this is about a panel or two.
Should
And a small panel.
Should I be offended?
Like a 16-panel page. 2 panels in that.
Okay.
But I wanted to talk about that because actually Leapfrog is such a goofy villain.
Oh yeah, he sucks.
Have you heard of Leapfrog
Oh no,
before?
but from what I've seen here, he sucks.
So one of my old comics was the Leapfrog comic. And when I say old, I mean like bought from a used comic book store from this uncle in Parkway Parade who sells like $1 comics from the 70s and the 80s.
Wow.
And so I had a Spider-Man comic of him fighting Leapfrog. And Leapfrog has the goofiest costume I've ever seen.
Right.
And so it's really like, that's another way that Bendis and Mack are subverting everything is by taking Leapfrog, this ostensibly extremely goofy villain, and making him one of the worst guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like you dislike Leapfrog in a way that you don't really care about Kingpin as much.
Might be the devil.
Okay. I don't think that's true.
And then, so back to the story, Daredevil, in response to what Ben tells him, goes and visits the kid. He brings him out. He takes him out onto some place. Where are they? On a bridge?
They go to the top of, I think, the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, what looks like the Brooklyn Bridge.
And I think it's here where Timmy sort of tells all.
Well, there's this wonderful wordless page right before that where Matthew takes off his mask to show Timmy that he's not this hero that Timmy's reading in the comic books. He's a guy.
And he's blind.
And he's blind and he's just this guy and he's just this person. And there's this fantastic little scribble that's so easy to miss on the left, which is Timmy's little scrawl of Daredevil to an arrow pointing to just a stick figure, like a man. Like this is a human being.
He's just a guy.
He's just a guy.
And then on the other side is just the word face.
On the other side is the word face. And Timmy reaches to touch Matthew's face.
His eyes specifically.
His eyes specifically. And so there's this progression of the scratching goes from the figures I was just describing, and then underneath that it's touch, feel, and then face. And then sort of this intense blue light washes over Timmy, and we go back.
Oh, and the bottom of that same page, it has the scratchy words, remember.
And then we go into his
the memory.
And this time it's actually clear. We actually understand what's going on.
It's still in a sort of kiddish, scratchy style, washed in this sepia tone.
And it's exclusively from Timmy's POV.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Not entirely.
There's intersecting moments of Timmy screaming, like we see Timmy screaming. But outside of that, like when Leapfrog is yelling at Timmy, Leapfrog is yelling at us. His finger is jabbing at us and screaming at us.
Leapfrog sucks, man.
Yeah, Leapfrog sucks.
I hope he dies. Oh, wait, he does. Does Timmy ever get an arc? Does he become a superhero?
Well, that's what Marvel Knights is about. Marvel Knights isn't about that stuff, right? Marvel Knights is about just the grounded stories, the ordinary people trapped in this world of heroes.
Well, in my mind, Timmy becomes a superhero.
Okay, now.
I would like to believe that.
Okay, I'd like that for you.
Thank you.
And so we're going through this whole POV of Timmy and watching his dad almost murder his hero, Daredevil. And on the top right panel of the rightmost page, it's Timmy reaching for Daredevil's face again. And in that blue text, I assume this is Daredevil, it says, "I'm talking to the boy, but he doesn't hear me." And on the right side of that is all the things that his dad has shouted at him over the years.
Yeah, like just in the borders of the page.
The margins.
The margins of the page. Let me just read some of the stuff that are written here. Cable moving like a snake, like father's leather belt. Shut up. Shiny at the end. Shut up. Like dad's familiar belt buckle. Told you to shut up. And it's just memories of abuse and mistreatment.
And I think Mack is actually doing something so complicated about trauma and memory and how those things just exist in the fringes of people's mind, but they never leave, right? And how they carve the groove in the brain and they're there, right? And they're doing that through the construction of the page, through the comic book itself.
Man. And then this memory continues through the next page. More sepia-toned panels, some black and white as well.
Some more photorealistic sketches and then some more Timmy-esque drawings.
It's just a whole blend. I mean,
yeah, we're coming to the point where everything that's been set up for the last 3 issues, every single style is clashing and coming together into this, I want to say catharsis, but it's not a release. It's actually so tragic.
Yeah.
But it is all culminating in this moment of peak tension.
I mean, and then, you learn what we've already said with what Timmy did to his father, where the father actually ended up in a waste truck. And then we're back to reality. And Timmy hugs Daredevil. And that's the start of the little healing that I talked about.
And here's the thing, Nat, we don't actually even know if Timmy says any of this to Matt.
Maybe Matt senses it through the heartbeat or through, I don't know.
We don't know whether... I think that Timmy says this all because of this moment with Daredevil, because of this moment with Matt and seeing him as a human being and no longer this larger-than-life comic book character. He's able to understand what's happened to him, right? Because now he's parsed out the events and put them in a sequence that he can register, that he can feel. And so now he can tell Ben that story. But within this context of this story, I don't think he actually tells Matt what happens.
At least verbally.
At least verbally, because the panels in which he's reaching for Matt's face right before he remembers is the exact same panel when we come back to the Brooklyn Bridge. Matt's still just looking at him. And he says, "Kid, are you okay?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I don't actually think Timmy says anything to Matt. I think we're just brought into Timmy's mind for like 6 pages, into that montage, into the only way he can understand this awful hand he's been dealt in life, the comic book.
And then the whole arc ends with Ben bringing Timmy with him.
Yes, brings Timmy back to his house.
Yeah.
To meet his family.
Yeah, his caricature of a family, who again are represented as caricatures here. And the exact words that Ben says, "This is Timmy, and Timmy wanted to know if he could hang out with us for a while." And then this person, who is that Ben's dad?
Ben's son.
Oh, Ben's son says...
Who he has a bit of a troubled relationship with.
Right. Says, "Hey, is that a 12-inch Captain America with the flying action shield? Cool." And then Timmy smiles. And that's just a little lift in your spirits. If not, we would all end this arc feeling extremely depressed. I want to return to something that we didn't mention just now, which is, would you allow me to read this section of text that is in the journalistic voice of Ben, if you will, because of the way the font is presented, it's in that typewritery font.
I'll allow it, Counselor.
You allow it? Okay. "In my travels as a reporter for this paper, sometimes it feels like I have met every kind of person there is. Every kind of human diversity. But I haven't. Every once in a while, the world surprises even the most jaded, of which I must include myself, with someone like Timmy. Timmy was born into this world just like the rest of us. And like many of us, he has spent every single conscious moment of it trying as best he can to tune it all out. Because just like the rest of us, no one asked Timmy who he would like for parents. No one asked Timmy what kind of environment he would like to live in. Certainly no one told Timmy that sometimes life just isn't fair. That sometimes people can be mean for no good reason, that people who say they love you can treat you badly, but most importantly, no one bothered to tell Timmy that these things are not his fault."
Ugh.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, that's great writing. It's really good. Bendis is just
Cooking.
I don't even want to say cooking because we use that almost jokingly now. Like he's writing truth. He's writing something so evocative.
So universally
Yeah.
true. Like it's about Timmy, but it's about so many stories that we know of that you have heard of also in your line of work.
Yes, yeah. My line of work sounds so nebulous now.
I didn't want to reveal it. You can reveal it if you want.
No, I just currently I work as a copywriter at a homeless shelter. So I speak
Yeah.
to people who have had very difficult lives. Yeah, and I actually was just listening to an interview with one of them earlier today. And there's just a lot of resonance with this story, which is crazy because this is a comic book that is about a man who was powered by radiation. Right? We're talking about something that should be so much larger than life. And Mack and Bendis bring it to Earth, bring it into a very real place.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is because they choose Ben as the center point, a man who has no powers.
Yeah.
I want to read this section from the opening. So
Sure.
remember that long chunk?
Yeah, the long prose.
I'm not going to read all of it. It's just about Ben talking about how he always wanted to be a writer. And then in college, he got very excited about it. But the enthusiasm, so it goes like this. In college, it became very clear that whatever enthusiasm I brought with me didn't translate into creativity. So instead, I have a job where I relate facts in an orderly and objective manner. I still get to create my word pictures, but the pictures usually paint a picture of something bad that happened to someone somewhere. That's the whole comic book. That's what this whole arc is about. It's about painting pictures with words with pictures. This inability to separate those two things in the comic book form, the picture and the word are the same. And I think it's just, when I reread this, I get so excited by the fact that they sneak that in there. They're telling you, hey, this is what this is about. This is about, that even that thing about his job is not about doing things in an orderly fashion.
Yeah.
So much of this comic is about sequencing.
Yeah.
About how you cannot understand something if you are not able to process the sequence in which it happened to you.
Right.
Right?
And then the art is so disorderly in many ways, but then we find the sequence through other means.
And we go back to this moment where Timmy sees the belt and baton that Leapfrog is about to use on Daredevil, right? And it's actually linear sequencing isn't the answer.
Right.
Right? The fact that Timmy is able to remember those things asynchronously, like not in the order in which they happened, he's able to connect those two things, and then he's able to get to the conclusion that Ben gives to him, which is it's not his fault.
Right.
Because before that moment, he's seeing it in the exact sequence at which it happened. He's not remembering the things that happened before. He's not remembering how his dad abused him. He's only thinking of what he perhaps sees as a mistake, which is accidentally killing his father or accidentally wounding his father in a major way.
Yeah.
But then once it comes together and once he's able to take something that happened at a totally different time and place and bring it in sequence
And give context to his actions.
in order, then he's able to sort of free himself from this trap of panels that he's stuck in, of this text that's in loops, because the gutters are also a prison. They're also a trap.
Yeah.
Right? And as it goes along, Mack starts to use less and less of that like interior grids. Because within the first issue, there's a lot of like panels within panels within panels.
Right.
Right? And again, what's that coming back to? Destabilization, entrapment. Nat, it's the time for me to ask you for the final time of season 2. Will you keep reading?
As the sun is setting on us, I mean, things are getting dark in this room, but that's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay. I think it's fitting for the sun setting of this season.
Okay,
Well,
answer the question.
Yeah. I just wanted to acknowledge our changing lighting conditions and how romantic it is right now.
No, just answer the question, man.
Well, does this arc continue? Like Timmy's arc?
No,
Okay.
we leave Timmy behind here.
But the rest of this series, if you will, is it a similar framing of like Ben and
Ben is a feature character of it. Not all of it features Ben as the main character, but Bendis does stay on, and this sensibility stays.
is Daredevil equally absent in the rest of this series?
He's a little, he becomes more present.
Right, because
Because actually this run isn't really like the launching point of Bendis entering the Daredevil canon, which he does eventually, because Bendis writes maybe one of the best runs of Daredevil ever. This is kind of like an interim thing of him just working with David Mack.
Right.
And that's also why it's so amazing, is because of the synergy they were able to do. And then when Bendis comes on for real, he gets into a bit more of a longer term story involving Matthew Murdock.
I see.
Right? Whereas this one is very self-contained. It starts and ends here.
So that's why I don't really know how to answer that question. I would like to read the whole thing in its entirety because I skipped 17 and a bit of 18.
Okay, you know what? No, what was the question I asked you about Asterios
keep-
Polar? Will you reread it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
No, this was beautiful. And I think it's interesting, you've talked Daredevil up a lot. But then in the first one we read, it was sort of very action-centric and we didn't really get to, like, I would say, the spirit of Matthew Murdock too much.
Yeah.
And then this one, he wasn't even here.
No.
So I don't know if I'm getting an accurate whole picture of who Daredevil is.
What I'm doing is there's a piece of paper and in the middle of it is Daredevil. I'm just circling around it and we're slowly spiraling in and eventually we'll do an issue that's about him.
Season 20, folks.
Daredevil Sans.
And so, I mean, I loved this.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't obvious already, I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I think it's a masterpiece.
It's incredible.
In storytelling. I don't know how much of that has to do with Daredevil himself, but as a work of art, it was amazing.
But the thing is that also this story couldn't be told with like Spider-Man.
I don't know.
I do think a big part of it is this vulnerability and this guilt and shame and all of these that are embroiled within the character of Daredevil. Daredevil may not appear, but the themes that create the character are very much there.
Right.
Right? Because Ben is full of shame in the same way that Matt is.
Right.
And guilt. And so I think I don't think this could be done with like Wolverine.
Oh, yeah.
Or Punisher who kills people. Right? I think this is a Daredevil story, even though he only appears in like the 4th issue of it.
Yeah.
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 What is my second question? Is it the pipeline already?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you asked. Pipeline, pipeline. Come on, friends, it's pipeline time.
Wonderful song. Wonderful little ditty.
It's probably not the same as what I sang last episode, but maybe that's the bit. Maybe I change it every episode.
I think you should. Okay, so yeah, Nat. So the pipeline is if you like X, you would like Daredevil Wake Up. Solve for X. I would say if you enjoy movies that are about journalism.
Okay.
And the importance of journalism and what it means to write about a story, I think this is a great comic book for you. So some examples of those would be Spotlight, Zodiac, Not About a Reporter, but Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. These are all stories that are basically about somebody who senses that there's a secret and they need to uncover that secret. Yeah, and I would say that that's very much what this book is about as well. I would also recommend Romeo plus Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann interpretation, which is specifically where I believe David Mack got that picture of Leonardo DiCaprio as the model for Peter Parker.
Thematically, no link.
Thematically, no link at all.
For my recommendation, I'm going to loop back, again, go full circle to... Well, not full circle. It was like a half a circle. Because I think I mentioned this episode 5, I believe, which is a movie I watched on the plane to New York, which is The Holdovers. I think there are similar resonant themes of the hurt that people hold within, especially young people, and bad parenting and trauma that is accumulated over years and manifests in certain ways. And to some extent, maybe to a greater extent, in The Holdovers, healing.
Yeah.
So I think if that kind of story resonates with you and you enjoy that kind of storytelling, I would recommend.
I think that's a good recommendation, Nat. I think that's a great recommendation. Also, I do love The Holdovers, so I could be a little biased.
It's a great movie.
And now the final part of the pipeline. If you like Daredevil Wake Up, you would like
this other comic that Yant's going to suggest right now, which is
Marvels. Which I also wonder, like, if you've read.
Wait, did you just say the company?
No. It's a comic book called Marvels. Marvels is by Kurt Busiek and illustrated by Alex Ross, who is another fantastic artist who is doing similar things to Mack, but less, I would say, formally experimental. He's doing very, very painterly stuff.
Right.
I mean, like, Alex Ross's images are some of just like, they're just serene. They're incredible. I don't even know how to describe them to you. But more than that, more than just the aesthetic similarities, it's the tonal approach. Because Marvels is about this old man living in the Marvels universe and the different historic events he's encountered through it. So it's kind of a revisiting of the origins of like Marvel Comics. So he's there in like a pivotal moment of the X-Men's history, the Fantastic Four's history, but he's just a guy.
I see.
And I think there's this very grounded approach to what happens to real people in these worlds.
Right.
So many of these stories are about what the biggest character there is. Let's look at the small guy. Let's look at the little man.
It's not about the world wars and the alien space invasions. It's about the guy on the street.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Apple put out a product called Apples?
Anyway, there's also a Marvel's audio series that I haven't had the pleasure of listening to yet, but we just want to shout that out too, is Cousins Within Our Life.
Life?
Cousins Within Our Media of Audio.
Sure.
That's a recommendation of a thing I have not listened to, but I will go listen to it. So maybe it's just a recommendation to myself.
Maybe. And think about apples for a second.
Nat, we've hit the end of season 2. Any closing thoughts? Any favorites? Any standouts? Any moments that have stuck with you?
I think this season has been really interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, my knowledge of the medium has increased exponentially through your wonderful teaching in season 1.
You're so welcome, Nat.
Yeah, I didn't say thank you. So in season 2, the approach was a bit different. We focused a little bit more on the individual comics and less of what they were doing in terms of the overall medium and what the medium can do, but more in terms of the stories that they were telling.
Yes.
And how they were telling those stories. And I really enjoyed that. I think it gave me a very varied experience of what a comic book can do, from sex criminals to Asterios Polyp to what we read today, going back even further to, we read manga, we've read a manhwa,
More Daredevil.
I think just the breadth.
Don't forget. Gideon Falls.
Thank you. I think just the breadth of what we read this season was really eye-opening for me.
And I'll say it was very exciting for me to do this season.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like I was catching you up on the foundations of like, oh, why does this thing matter in context? I was just bringing you some of my favorite shit. Some of my favorite shit.
Your favorite frappuccinos. I don't know where that came from.
I don't drink coffee. I was just bringing you the stuff that really excites me.
Yeah.
And I think we had a great time. I think we read a lot of really, really fun stuff.
I think that came through.
Already excited for season 3, where in season 3, I'm actually going to pivot again and I'm going to bring you all the stuff I hate.
Nice.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us on this journey. We could close with a little thought. Remember, if you're an artist out there, make stuff you love and it comes through. Even if it's just to you, that's better than no one at all.
Yeah. I think that's been a running theme throughout this whole season. Like, it's been so clear that the artists making the work care about the work, had fun making the work, and it meant something to them on a very personal level.
And in the end, it means something to us too when you read it, whether it lands fully or not, just because it exists.
Although, Bleach, not sure.
Oh, I knew you were going to bring up Bleach. Okay, thanks everyone for listening to season 2 of Comic Sans. We'll see you.
Whenever we see you.
Did you just ruin my closing catchphrase?
If we see you.
If we see you, that's kind of disturbing because this is an audio format.
But we would say hi for sure.
We will definitely say hi. Thank you everyone for listening to season 2 of Comic Sans. We'll see you behind the next page.
Behind? See ya. Thanks for listening to Comic Sans. This is an Andas Productions podcast hosted by Myle Yant and Nathaniel Ma, and produced by Roshan Singh Sambhi and Scott Lee Chua. Our cover art is by Isabel Fang. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and rate Comic Sans. And while you're at it, follow us on social media at Comic Sans Pod. Links are in the description below.